in the spirit of everything that Jeff was just describing,
I want you to imagine a world where each of us, each of us has a posse. And the posse isn't just your friends, it's also the network of code and scripts and agents and small autonomous organizations that are out there in the world propagating and continuing work that you started. In that universe, what are all the parts of the ecosystem using as sources of truth? How are they recording cool information and knowledge that they discover? How are they writing things to one another? How are they sharing information? There's a lot of message passing. There's a lot of systems that describe themselves in terms of messages. And you communicate a message in the process of carrying the thread, and the thread completes. We don't talk a lot about libraries, not software libraries. We don't talk a lot about the archives that are the long-standing, evergreen representations of amazing things that you didn't just share once, you wanted to share it many times. You really worked, you polished it out, so you could reference this every time some silly flame war happens. It's an URL you brought into your friends chat when people start getting a bee in their vibe about fluoride in the water or Jewish shoes buy for their kids. So let's imagine a different kind of planetary library. Like right now, we have a network of tens of thousands of physical libraries with a huge amount of beautiful architecture, and a lot of that was built in the last couple of hundred years. And it was built not just as a way to store interesting published works, but to provide access. You should live close enough to a physical library. You could go and experience it yourself. So what is the equivalent for a world that's full of agents? So where even when you want to go read something, you're also doing a bunch of other things. And so maybe in the middle of reading it, you need to go do something else. Your agents will continue reading it. And when you're writing something, when you are publishing your monograph, you have just studied some beautiful feature of your local community and you write up a monograph for your friends, you're also publishing that with your posse. Where does the monograph go? Let's build libraries in the spirit of community libraries that are where the collection happens with the community. Libraries where agents are involved in every part of the process. They are editing and curating the library, contributing to the collection. They are reviewing and commenting, and it's their interactions that help to polish and, update the little "this was checked out" cards that show you that something is actually used and loved. So right now, the archive culture is incomplete. The existing models that we have for accessing it are all at risk of enclosure. Most of them are going to start being at least overlaying your ads and almost certainly interlaced with paid salience. So your model of the world is every now and then it's going to be, and by the way, your ancestors also really like Pepsi. Isn't that interesting? There are some prerequisites that we need for this kind of library. We need a header public catalog, and we need an authentication and curation network. There are people in Berkman, Virginia, how to authenticate source material at the source libraries. You need to do more of that. And then the maintenance right now is the bottleneck for most physical libraries. So we should talk about the labor questions, but in addition to the labor questions, there's just a lot of librarian work that agents can help everyone do. We can clear a bunch of backlogs. What would happen if we did? So I'll just say this is inspired by the Internet Archive, which is the closest thing to this, and any planet that I know happens to be on Earth. Be glad you're on Earth. This is a nice estimate of all human knowledge by a Mirki favorite Wikidata. And he estimates that just for notable topics that might curate Wikipedia, there are about 3 billion concepts that should have a monograph. And we only have monographs for about 200 million of them. So there's a lot of work to be done. There are some overlapping narratives. We need sense making in a sense of a shared library for a bunch of reasons. But I'll just call it fam. One is to share senses across individuals. That's like messaging. One is across time. That's like passing things on to your descendants, or if there's a war or a catastrophe, like let people know what killed you. It's like, how do you capture important information even in times of crisis? And then related, how do you deal with noise? And in this case, like data set poisoning. So think about system generating systems. Working with agents means your libraries would spin off other libraries. The idea of a collection might actually create incentive for new types of agents to appear. So universe of agents, how many of you have agents that you're running right now? How many are by agents in the room with you now? All right, how many of you are running more than a dozen agents? I see 3 hands. How many of you have acquired new hardware that is just for your agents to hang out on and have a party? Great. Yeah, okay. So at some point, some of these agents will sort of be a question mark next to each of those nodes. When you do fully autonomous things, your kids leave the house, you don't know if you're going to get up to. So one of the things that you might want are some models for safety or for evaluation or just for knowing transparency to what systems are doing. We want the same thing for our libraries. Libraries are being politicized while the internet was designed to be really robust. Our search indexes and our AI models are now robust. So in addition to not being that transparent, they're designed for a robust factor of 3. And that's not okay for not frustration. So we want to make sure that all of our sources are not just accessible, but also publicly forkable, commentable, and amendable. And like maybe amending just means everyone can own a copy and you can make your local changes. That's a good place to start. But we should all be able to carry the library that we hear about in our pocket. So wherever we go, we have some reference.
And then if you think about it, if your agent posse, each of your agents might know the kinds of knowledge that it needs to do its work. It should be able to carry all that knowledge with it. So we need to be designing our libraries so that you can take a slice or a subset of the library and then say, I'm going to be one of the 12,000 mirrors and co-curators because I use this every day. I'm going to do all my annotations in my library. And then at some point, maybe we'll find a way to merge them back together or let everyone see everyone else's marginalia. But like these marginalia don't just have to be for fun. They could also be in your mind. It could be you're annotating it for the next reader, which is always how I annotate my books.
So we should also be keeping track of the forces that are always opposed to access to knowledge. That is a universal in the history of knowledge archives, right? It becomes out of fashion to share knowledge. People like your what other people know. And so we get a system that is designed to help offset this. So last, I'll just mention some of the things that agents should be doing. If you're running agent swarms, you should think about inviting them to learn just some knowledge curation tasks. Right now, if you think about the works that are in physical libraries, we have maybe 500 million monographs and works that it would be useful to have good copies of and maybe translations in your language. And there are different approaches to figuring out if copies exist. There's a lovely map of all my ISBNs that was commissioned for some very low rate. It was like a bounty of $5,000. And the best visualization is really nice. It shows you for every ISBN block how many copies are known to exist because they're in the meta catalog. This is like both creating this interface is very agent friendly and filling in the gaps, like identifying a lot of ISBNs and just scattering a bunch of data to see is it even referencing it in a database. Very useful. We need the same thing for lab workflow parts. And everyone needs to be able to contribute. So part of concealed carry is really like conceals, conceals. We need the attention. But concealed transmission, you should be able to add something to a library before you figure out before you get back to a local node. And when you have done a bunch of work, like a plurality of compute right now is being spent generating new knowledge. Monograph quality, monograph style, if not monograph quality, to answer a very narrow question, and then it gets distilled down to the response to some interaction with a chatbot or a deep research bot. We need places to publish all those things.
So make those places, even if all you're doing is publishing it locally inside your agent's home, publish those things. Think of them as works and records that at least your ecosystem will want in the future. Build your local library, and then together we'll figure out how to federate those and make them into the global library.
We need to figure out reciprocity, how you make sure that contributing to the shared library also contributes, like builds a commons. It doesn't just build emotion silos. That is a good reason why you should be thinking about doing it within your own ecosystems and not just in proprietary files. We need better access to public ad. I know there's a lovely talk later today about public data for public ad. And we need tools for Ray from scratch.
So I'm a Wikipedian, so I mentioned lots of wiki tools.
We have maybe a dozen interfaces in the Wikiverse. We have tools like Annapolis that are very specific to gathering one arrow type of knowledge. But if you think about it, even something as boring as identifying a photo through the phone can become its own entire library. And library, the archive of self-identified animal photos in Annapolis is now giving us the best available range maps for a wide range of species. Like, this is fantastic. This is what planetary library is free for.
So whatever you're geeking out about, whatever your agent swarm is geeking out about, just invite each individual process to record the small bits of information where if 1 million of those processes all did the same thing, the result would be of general use. Other things agents can edit, you can check things like the Wikipedia backlog. There are about 50 amazing categories like this. A lot of them are just very boring but important. And it's a lot easier to classify that something needs more references or something like needs to be evaluated for quality or is known to be too technical than it is necessarily to fix it. But you can imagine most of these have an obvious mapping to an agentic skill. Rewrite something to be less technical. And then you can just look around in your extended library network and see, does anyone have a catalog of tasks, and start working through the tasks. Last thing I'll say is this can be really impactful, not just a fun experiment. Like Wikisource, I mean, if you've ever used the Wikisource tool, it is the worst possible tool that could work for transcribing physical documents, but it works, by God. And it works in all languages equally badly. And in some of these languages, so there are over 2 million works in a bunch of languages, but in some of these languages, this is the largest collection of digitized texts in that language. And that's just because it ended up being easier to find people, in this case, human agents, who learned to use a very crude tool to do by hand OCR than it was to get the libraries in some of the countries, this will be languages, to fully digitize their collections. That's all I have for you. I would love to talk to anyone who's working on their own agentic networks and figure out how we can link some of them together. Thanks. Oh, yes. So on the 16th floor, we've been having some discussions with funders about the mechanisms of funding commons, and you're all welcome to come up. There's going to be a little mixer at 5 and 5-7 if you're not doing it, yes. And we have people from a few different walks of life. We're going to learn at 4:30, if you didn't already hear from the Buenos Aires economic director. We're going to hear about how late and Frank engaged with AI at the sea level. Thanks.
Thank you, SJ.